All right, we're going to move on to the next topic, which is at the intersection of gamification and loyalty. And I want to start off by introducing my friend and one of the foremost experts on the transition in the loyalty industry, Geoff Lewis. Geoff is the co-founder and CEO of TopGuest, which is an early-stage technology company that seeks to translate social media activity by loyalty program members into new kinds of incremental engagement and transactional opportunities. TopGuest was just launched in 2010, but has already done some amazing things. Its partners include Hilton, Wyndham, Virgin America, and others. Before that, Geoff was a hedge fund guy, has appeared a lot on television, and helps myriad startups in New York and around the world with his unique insight, which is truly startlingly unique. And he's here today to give us some insight into some of the new visions of loyalty and how the loyalty business, which impacts all of us and has tremendous effect on all of us, how it is being transformed by gamification. So, Geoff? Thanks, Geoff.
Is there a clicker for this? Is there like a clicker? Oh yeah, perfect. Okay. Awesome. All right. Great. Well, since I don't see a mic, I will stand here. Thank you very much for that introduction. Truly startling insights. This is like a very high bar that you've set for me. So I think what I should probably do is start out with a bit of a slightly insane anecdote, and I hope that everyone in the audience will forgive me because this is a little bit esoteric. But I want us to all think back to like 1999. And at that time, in certain urban pockets like Williamsburg, Brooklyn, the Mission District in San Francisco, there was this sort of new, very different way that certain people started to carry themselves. And it was generally among males characterized by sort of like three key traits. So drinking copious amounts of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, buying sort of vintage thrift store plaid shirts and tight skinny jeans at a very like short list of thrift stores in a few select neighborhoods, and finally copious amounts of facial hair. And of course I'm referring to the hipster. And this idea of being a hipster first emerged in 1999, and by about 2003, I think, June of 2003, hipsterism, quote unquote, was the cover story in Time magazine. And if we fast forward today, being a hipster is no longer this sort of like odd, unusual thing. It's become very mainstream to the degree that I think probably like 30% of the people in this room may actually be hipsters. And this sort of insane and completely seemingly irrelevant anecdote, for me, has always underscored an idea that I think is very important when it comes to loyalty, which is this idea that when everything is different in exactly the same way, nothing is different anymore. And that's true of hipsters. It's now just become mainstream. It's true of so many things, and it's also true of loyalty. To the degree that I think we need to get rid of the word loyalty altogether, and I think this is going to really underscore my talk today. I think we need to replace the word loyalty with engagement. It's far more than semantics, and we're going to drive into why today. And it's up to us. To re-engineer this entire industry and get rid of this like old framework for how to do things. So if you think about traditional loyalty programs, despite the fact that today more Americans than ever before have multiple loyalty cards in their wallet, the loyalty industry accounts for more revenue than ever before for airlines, for hotels, the financial services industry. Despite all of that, these programs all, until very recently, have had marginal differences, if any differences at all, among one another. And we have to change that. And so the solution that I propose today is badges. Okay, that's not actually the solution. Okay, so that's not actually the solution. So the solution's not badges, but it's up to us to actually fix this. And so in order, we're sort of all here. I think many of us are relatively new to the loyalty space. I certainly am. And what's been really helpful for me, just to get grounded, and hopefully it'll be helpful for some people in the audience as well, is to take a quick look back to the history of traditional loyalty programs, okay? And as is true with sort of any business construct, I believe that to understand like the business and where it's come from, you have to understand the cultural context, the cultural zeitgeist. So if we look back to the post-war era in the 20th century, let's start culturally. What was the cultural touchstone for loyalty? Who can identify this pop? That's Lassie. Okay, so in my humble opinion, Lassie is the embodiment of loyalty as a traditional American value, okay? This is sort of like, if there's one cultural touchstone for loyalty, it's Lassie. And if you dive into the semiotics of loyalty, which I've actually spent some time doing, just because I think it's pretty fascinating, you'll find that all of the imagery around loyalty, all of the symbolism around loyalty sort of echoes everything that Lassie embodies. So just this idea of devotion to a specific career, smiling faces, it's all sort of very retro, very old school. These are actually the top two pictures identified in a semiotic study of loyalty a few years ago at the University of Manchester. And this sort of like retro, this retro tone that underscores loyalty kind of makes sense when you think about what loyalty actually is. And I think Seth Godin defines it best when he says, loyalty is what we call it when someone refuses a momentarily better option. And if you think about this era, sort of like 1954 to like 2000, until the advent of the internet and sort of it started to get mainstream adoption, obviously in the late 90s, it was relatively easy to sort of go through life being loyal. It was certainly a lot easier to be loyal back then than it is today. It was sort of less mobility between geographies, there was not so much a paradox of choice in that it was much harder to discover new products, new merchants, et cetera. And concurrently, inherent in loyalty was this belief that at the end of the day, this is obviously a fundamental part of the loyalty mechanic, your loyalty will be rewarded. So even if you're forgoing potentially a better option in the short term, in the long run, you're going to get some sort of a great payout for your loyalty. And of course, that payout could take the form of like access, power, status, stuff. But nonetheless, this promise of a big payout sort of very important. And for many folks, that took the form of being loyal to an employer for like 30, 40 years from a cultural standpoint, and then having this sort of awesome retro retirement. And so against this cultural backdrop, it makes perfect sense that loyalty programs emerged. Of course, with the first one, 1981, AA Advantage, quickly copied by a slew of other folks. And yet, all of these loyalty programs, every single loyalty program that launched between 1981 and up until the last few years, followed the exact same construct. So in order to get enrolled in the loyalty program, the consumer first has to transact. There's simply no mechanism, no framework for engaging with, for communicating with, for understanding even who prospects were before the transaction. And then following that, sort of everyone adopted very similar points or mile structures. You sort of earn points, you receive push marketing, loyalty marketing in a very standardized format, initially direct mail, ultimately email, and now we're moving on to new forms. You transact, and then if you go through this circle enough times, you ultimately get some sort of status. And you know what? For about 20 to 30 years, this actually worked okay. I mean, loyalty grew into an absolutely massive industry. We're all trying to get a piece of it and try and reinvent it today via gamification. But I would actually argue that around 1999, this whole idea of, around 1999, this whole sector of loyalty, I think, actually peaked. And I don't think that anyone in the loyalty industry today would say, oh, our industry peaked in 1999. And I would argue that it did. And I think understanding why is critical to us figuring out together how we can just totally reinvent this industry, rename it to engagement, symbolic of its reinvention. So I think it peaked for sort of a few reasons. Going back to our cultural sort of grounding, Lassie actually having been continuously on the air from 1954 to 1999, I was taken off air in the year 1999, which to me is sort of symbolic, seriously, which to me is symbolic of like the end of loyalty as a dominant cultural meme in American society. I think that people oftentimes underrate, do not pay enough attention to how these pop cultural threads actually inform what's going to happen in the future from a business standpoint. The second thing that happened in 1999 was the first major currency devaluation by a large loyalty program. So in 1999, American AA Advantage devalued their currency by 6.89%, which was tremendous and sort of, well, it wasn't the beginning of currency devaluation in the loyalty space that had been happening for a long time before, certainly the most significant, and really led to consumers who had been very engaged with airline loyalty programs specifically, starting to question, will I really be rewarded in the end? Will there really be a payout, or is this just another tactic to try to get me to buy something? And of course, there weren't outlets at the time like Flyer Talk or MilePoint, but those seeds of distrust among consumers were sown around this era. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, the internet, obviously, mainstream adoption of the internet sort of had a massive impact, as sort of exemplified by Google, which actually launched late 1998, but I'm grouping it into 99. And this whole idea of being loyal, meaning forgoing a better option in the near term for sort of some long-term emotional motivation and ultimately the promise of some sort of payout, whether tangible or intangible, was actually became much harder to do because a better option obviously is now just a click away in real time. So that's sort of setting the stage. So if we sort of set the stage as this is sort of how this space has shaked out, let's fast forward to today. Now, from a sort of tertiary glance at the loyalty industry today, it seems to be doing quite well. So this slide got a little messed up, but it's, there are $48 billion of loyalty points outstanding in the United States alone today, sort of a big statistic. However, there are very clear cracks in the foundation. I'm all sort of building up to the point here. Just stay with me for like one more minute. So there's sort of two big cracks in the foundation. So first is breakage. Obviously, breakage among the currency programs is increasing year over year as consumers just find it harder to redeem their currencies. And if we remember back to a few slides ago, the entire loyalty model is just predicated on earning currency. That's how traditional sort of large established loyalty programs work. Breakage is a real problem. And then you have this concurrent problem of ever-decreasing open rates. Like, who here gets multiple emails from loyalty programs, daily deal sites, flash sales sites a day? Let's see a show of hands. Right. Now, we're probably like early adopters, I would imagine, but this is certainly a mainstream problem. My parents have complained about it to me. And sort of open rates are decreasing, in some cases mid-single digits, month after month for traditional loyalty programs. And this really sort of puts a damper on that core part of the traditional loyalty program life cycle, which is push marketing, loyalty marketing, since the primary delivery vehicle for those messages is email. So this is actually a serious problem that's not talked about nearly enough in the industry. And then finally, culturally, loyalty continues to be sort of a waning type of construct. It's not something that's really cool to talk about in the way that engagement, for example, is, and even in the marketing industry specifically. So the last point I'm going to make on this is that, circling back to this whole cultural theme, if you think about if Lassie was the cultural touchstone for loyalty in the latter half of the 20th century, I would have to say that in the aughts, it would be Up in the Air. And while on the surface, Up in the Air appears to be a very pro-loyalty movie. After all, American Airlines sponsored it to the tune of I think $5 or $10 million or something. Sort of the primary character, who's the most obsessed person with loyalty points in the world, sort of unable to love, isolated, lonely, and sort of borderline sociopathic. So take that for what you will. Now, that's the backdrop. So the good news is we can all fix this. Us people in this room are going to fix this problem because we together are creating a future that is actually not about loyalty at all. It's about engagement. And this is just, it seems like a semantic nuance. It's not. Everything we just talked through is loyalty. It's an old paradigm. The new paradigm is engagement. One of the earlier panels, the real versus virtual rewards, touched on some of the stuff I'm going to talk through, so I may skip a little bit of it. But we're in a new world where for the first time, due to two things, social and mobile, you can actually measure and respond to consumer engagement for the first time. Like, this just was not possible. The only form of engagement that a loyalty program could track previously were transactions and monetary transactions. And monetary transactions are one form of engagement, but obviously any sort of social action I take related to a brand, that's another form of engagement. Wherever I go is in some way a form of engagement that can be linked back to a loyalty program as tracked by the GPS on my phone. Heck, security cameras. There was a startup that launched at TechCrunch Disrupt the other day, Prism Skylabs. I'm not sure if anyone saw this, but even how people are moving within a space is a form of engagement that moving forward we're going to be able to track. And the beauty is that all of this data, for the first time, can be pulled into a loyalty program database, can be pulled into a CRM system, and leveraged in myriad ways. And this is like absolutely transformational, and it's just getting started. And it actually got started, I would argue, with Tasty Delight. So folks may remember this Tasty Delight implementation, which sort of went live shortly after Foursquare launched. I would argue that this was the first instance of a real, established loyalty program, in this case, Tasty Rewards, tapping into social engagement in an opt-in way. So having consumers connect their Twitter, Foursquare, Facebook accounts, and begin to receive different types of rewards for varying types of social actions linked to the value of those social actions. Now, it's very much a work in progress. It's very small scale, but it actually gave birth to something much bigger, which is that all those established loyalty programs that I was beating up on, those folks like AA Advantage, are now, today, rapidly morphing into engagement programs. This is happening behind the scenes. It's happening in a white label manner. It's something that's not like the hot topic in gamification. We're all talking about how to gamify websites, how to expand loyalty and gamification to local merchants. No one is talking about what's going on with large established loyalty programs. And shameless plug warning, that's exactly what TopGuest does. So what we basically set out to do with our company when we founded this a little over a year ago was to transform large traditional loyalty programs into engagement programs that sort of automatically respond to, measure, and reward social actions, social engagement, cross applications. Today we have a reach of 260 million members through our white label products primarily, as well as our consumer brand, TopGuest.com, and are working with many of the largest names in the business. And the enabling technology for us is obviously APIs. And I think that leveraging APIs is just this huge opportunity, obviously in gamification, generally for marketing going forward. And the approach that we've taken, I think Brendan from CrowdTap earlier on was talking about, some brands attempt to create this immersive, gamified experience, which is brand specific. That's very tricky, and so I very much agree with that. And what our thesis at TopGuest is, and the way that we're building out our suite of products, is that we create an engaging game layer on top of these social applications you're already using. So you keep using Facebook, you keep using, if you're into Foursquare, Twitter or Instagram, adding more applications all the time. TopGuest works in concert with those apps. It's not another thing that you have to download or engage with. Essentially what we do is, in an opt-in way, receive social permissions from loyalty program members, and then track that data and respond to it selectively on a going basis. So when we went in and pitched Hilton Honors back in November of 2010 on this idea, and I was sitting there with the CMO who's in his 50s and said, we are going to implement this product whereby your loyalty program members are going to give us sort of ongoing access to their Facebook data. We're going to read their status updates, their check-ins, their likes, their friends lists, and we're going to identify what's relevant to Hilton Honors and respond to it. He basically threw me out of his office, but sure enough, we've ended up launching it. And believe it or not, we have 80% opt-in. And this is a shocking figure for traditional loyalty programs. People are really surprised that consumers are opting in to share this degree of social data. And the reason why is because there's a clear value proposition. You're going to get something in return for doing this. It's going to make your loyalty experience with that program more fun and more relevant to you. Now, how can one do that, and how do we do it at TopGuest? The first thing that we do, as I said, is we monitor all sorts of social actions. So whether it's likes, check-ins, status updates, etc. And just as Brian from Keep was talking about how achievement moments in games are sort of these emotional moments, we believe that there's a long tail of these achievement moments. So when you receive a friend request on Facebook, that is actually a moment of fiero, a moment of achievement in a game-like way. When you like a page that may be a page of a band that you're really into, you get a little burst of dopamine. You get some adrenaline rushing. And the key for us at TopGuest is identifying of all of these social actions which you're taking on a daily basis, which are relevant to the loyalty programs that you're a member of. So it's identifying which of these are relevant, and then what is the absolute right response, whether it's a reward, some sort of recognition, what is the absolute right response to deliver to you only for those relevant actions. And here's an example of how it actually works. So this is something that's not live yet, but will be soon. An example of someone tweeting, this person has connected their AA Advantage account to their social networks, tweeting, made it through security at JFK in record time, 2 hours to kill before my flight. The future which we are trying to create is a future where immediately after that tweet in real time, we would route the absolute right response message to that loyalty program member. In this case, here's an access pass to try out our Admirals Club. This is presumably a consumer who has not previously been to an Admirals Club. It's a new form of recognition for her in the moment, highly relevant on every level. And this is actually what I mean by engagement programs, taking it to a completely different level. And the second thing you can do is harness social data to personalize and gamify sort of that boring loyalty marketing that you typically receive. So instead of receiving that same golf email that every other Hilton Honors member gets on a given day, personally, I hate golf and I'm terrible at it, you will begin to receive offers that are tailored just for you. So if you've taken an action at a certain venue, like shared your location or tagged a place on your Facebook feed, you may receive a miles incentive for that from your favorite airline, as well as an offer tailored to your specific likes for the city that you're traveling to. And this is the future, pulling all of these disparate sources of data together, making it relevant for you. That's what we mean by engagement loyalty. All it takes is a few good engineers, the ability to navigate APIs, and a lot of pounding on the pavement, beating down the doors of traditional loyalty programs. And this is what we are trying to do. So that's my talk for today, and I'd like to open it up for questions. Hi.
Hi. Is there any concern that consumers will start to game the system? I know I'm going to get an offer, so when I'm at the airport, I'm intentionally going to say, I'm in the game, I'm waiting on this.
Yeah, so we've actually made a number of changes to sort of avoid that. So sort of as a backdrop, one functionality that we provide that no one else does is we have a team of engineers that have spent a year sort of developing a heuristic approach to fraud detection with these types of rewards for social actions. So obviously when you apply real currencies to these types of virtual actions, there's massive potential for fraud. A heuristic approach is the only one that works. So we use a combination of rate limiting, velocity limiting, statistical limiting, and are really the experts globally on rewarding virtual actions with real rewards and real currencies, because we've just had so many man hours spent working on this problem. The second thing that we started to do is we've quickly and are continuing to shift very quickly away from rewarding every action. So our initial model when we started a year ago was you just get points for check-ins. Like that's what we started out. Was sort of interesting at the beginning, generated a lot of hype, quickly realized this is like one small part of what we need to be doing. So we're moving to a much more dynamic model where you're not always going to get something. You're going to be surprised by what you get. It's not always points, etc. Yeah? Hi, yeah?
So I really like your point about loyalty morphing to engagement. With all the companies that you listed switching to engagement, how do you see these companies winning in engagement? Jim kind of talks about engagement economy. Yeah. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think the beauty of engagement is that it's personal to every person. So every loyalty program member, engagement executed right is the experience is different for every loyalty program member based on their social data, based on their actions, and it's all customized and tailored and adapted in real time. And this is why every loyalty program actually can be different. Engagement program can be different in a way that all loyalty programs cannot be different from one another. And this is the real promise of real-time social data.
Hi, Griffin Toulouse from Social Dojo. I'm wondering, are you targeting influencers programmatically or manually?
I beg your pardon?
Are you targeting influencers in your programming?
Yeah, so we're doing quite a bit on that. So for all of our members, we obviously sort of have a list of Facebook friends and an understanding of the volume of sharing that they're doing on their social networks. Are beginning to develop influence rankings in the vein of like a cloud. Except the difference with us is the influence rank is directly tied to a loyalty program member ID in a CRM system. So it's just far more actionable and can have an impact across the whole marketing mix in a way that cloud can. Yeah.
When people give you permission to access their social data, how do you get companies to avoid the pressure to use that for other sorts of sales purposes and keep that locked in separate vaults from marketing information?
Yeah, totally. So we typically don't, so we today do not support like CRM system data append. So all of the social data is hosted on TopGuest servers. And we don't allow the programs to actually like pull that data directly into their CRM system today. We do polls and we support like obviously the ability, because we have every user's loyalty program number in our database, we're able to match up social data with the loyalty program number. Going forward, that is obviously a question. The key thing to remember is loyalty programs are never passing any data into us. It's always opted into by the consumer, and it's a really transparent exchange because the whole nature of the product is begin to receive rewards and personalized offers for your social actions. So it's very transparent in a way that sort of other data plays aren't. Yep.
It's on my mind for just speaking the legal session.
Okay.
We're talking about the notion of the FTC guidelines and to get a review, you have to disclose it. So that tweet, like that, American Airlines is great, blah, 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 and then getting essentially a reward for that. I mean, would that fall under potentially?
So this is a good question. I'm not certain of like the latest. The FTC guidelines are obviously like a living document evolving, but given that the reward is happening after an action and not in every case, our understanding today is no, and we have a lot of flexibility in our model to make sure that we're of course abiding by sort of regulations. It's obviously very important. Great.
Got what?